morning. I'm Dr. William Painter for Journey Road Ministries, coming to you from the bell tower of St. Mary's Cathedral, St. Mary's Church, located in Cambridge, Cambridgeshire, England, the overlooking the university town, King's College, and the place where Desiderius Erasmus and Martin Bucer came to preach during the Renaissance and Reformation. Today's passage comes from Matthew 9:35 to 10:8. When Jesus went about all the cities and villages, teaching in their synagogues and proclaiming the good news of the kingdom and curing every disease and every sickness, when he saw the crowds, he had compassion for them because they were harassed and helpless like sheep without a shepherd. Then he said to his disciples, "The harvest is plentiful, but the laborers are few. Therefore ask the Lord of the harvest to send out laborers into his harvest." Then Jesus summoned his 12 disciples and gave them authority over unclean spirits to cast them out and to cure every disease and every sickness. These are the names of the 12 apostles. First, Simon, also known as Peter, and his brother Andrew, James, son of Zebedee, and his brother John, Philip and Bartholomew, Thomas and Matthew, the tax collector, James, son of Alphaeus and Thaddeus, Simon the Cananean, and Judas Iscariot, the one who betrayed him. These 12 Jesus sent out with the following instructions: "Go nowhere among the Gentiles and enter no town of the Samaritans, but go rather to the lost sheep of the house of Israel. As you go, proclaim the good news. The kingdom of heaven has come near. Cure the sick, raise the dead, cleanse the lepers, cast out demons. You received without payment, give without payment. Take no gold or silver or copper in your belts, no bag for your journey, or 2 tunics or sandals or staff. For laborers deserve their food. Whatever town or village you enter, find out who in it is worthy and stay there until you leave. As you enter the house, greet it. If the house is worthy, let your peace come upon it. But if it is not worthy, let your peace return to you. If anyone will not welcome you or listen to your words, shake off the dust from your feet as you leave that house or town. Truly, I tell you, it will be more tolerable for the land of Sodom and Gomorrah on the day of judgment than for that town. See, I am sending you out like sheep into the midst of wolves. So be wise as serpents and innocent as doves. But beware of them, for they will hand you over to councils and flog you in their synagogues, and you will be dragged before governors and kings because of me, as a testimony to them and the Gentiles. When they hand you over, do not worry about how you are to speak or what you are to say, for what you are to say will be given to you at the time. For it is not you who speak, but the Spirit of your Father speaking through you. Brother will betray brother to death, and a father his child, and children will rise against parents and have them put to death. You will be hated by all because of my name, but the one who endures to the end will be saved. When they persecute you in one town, flee for the next. For truly I tell you, you will not have from all the towns of Israel before the Son of Man comes." Thus endeth the gospel. Well, that was an amazingly powerful piece. Lots of things going on in that gospel, and not the least of which I'm really quite fond of, just a personal note, quite fond of the apostles because they're like, Keystone Cops. They're not great people, okay? They're just not. I mean, they become great people, great in their own way, but they're not, Peter denies Christ. Matthew is a tax collector, one of the worst types of people. A Frenchman working for the Nazis, as it were, a collaborator. He was a Jew working for the Romans, and then of course Judas Iscariot, the betrayer. I mean, these were a hodgepodge, a mixed bag, and he converts them, as it were. I use that term very loosely. Converts them from being disciples, that is, followers, to being apostles, which are actually representatives of Jesus himself. So go out and be me, okay? Go out and be my proxy. Go out and be me. And that's a tough call. That's a tough thing to demand. I mean, it's one thing to be a follower of Jesus and try to follow and try to do the things that he asks us to do and tells us are important. But it's quite another matter to to be Jesus. And that's what he's telling these people to do. Go be me in these towns. And this is how you act. And this is what you do. And this is why you're going. And what I find interesting about this is the use of the term apostle and the fact that there are only male apostles. I mean, is it only men who can be Jesus by proxy? How come there are no women? Well, I did some digging and I found out that there actually were some women, some female apostles. The first of which was a woman named Junia, who is quoted in Romans 16, verse 7, by Paul himself. I mean, Paul wasn't exactly real strong on women, and yet here Paul refers to her, Junia, as an apostle. And so then I got scratching my head and thinking, well, what happened to this woman? Well, they changed her name. They took her name from Junia and made it Junius, which turned it into a masculine name. It'd be like taking a woman named Billy, Billie, and turning her into Billy, Billy. Right? There are other examples. And why would they do that? Well, they did that because this is basically a patriarchal culture. These Gentiles, these Greeks were, I would say, we would call them misogynists, okay? I mean, there were two types of women. There were, well, it sounds like the beginning of a joke. There's two types of women. There were the elite women who never left the house, never passed the threshold. They weren't allowed to leave. They weren't allowed to be in the company of males at all. When males would come into the house to talk, they would have to go to the female part of the house. The highest love that one had in ancient Greece was between two males. Then there was another type of female who was much like the women who ran the salon during the French Revolution or just prior to the French Revolution. And these were women who were not behind doors, and they held the company of men, and they had philosophical discussions with men. And so in ancient Greece, women did not hold equal footing with males. And in fact, in ancient Rome, the Romans really thought that it was considered an offense against the gods, against nature, against everything for women to hold equal footing with men. That's one of the problems they had with the Goths and the Druids, and that the women were battle lords and held land and were queens. And the Romans just thought, we should just kill them all because this is such a plague to have any kind of thinking like that. And so it's in that kind of an environment, in this Greco-Roman patriarchal environment, that our texts come. They're copied and miscopied. And one of the first, now the early patriarchs of the church, like John Chrysostom. Now, John Chrysostom, let me get his proper dates here. Let's see, he was the Archbishop of Constantinople. So he was, on a footing with, he was the Pope of the East, basically what he was. He was 347 to 407, so he lived about 60 years, which is a good long time for the period. He was a prolific writer, and one of his early writings, a homily on Romans, was equating how great the women were and how they put the men to shame. And he references Junia. The women of those days were more spirited than lions, sharing with the apostles their labors for the gospel's sake. In this way, we went traveling with them and also performed all other ministries. And even in Christ's day, there followed him women, which ministered unto him of their substance and waited upon the teachers. This also looks like an encomium, and what follows is much more so. What sort is this of, my fellow prisoners? This is in reference to Romans 16 verses 7. He's explaining it. Chrysostom is. My fellow prisoners, for this is the greatest honor, the noble proclamation. And where was Paul a prisoner, that he should call them my fellow prisoners? A prisoner indeed he had not been, but he had suffered things worse than prisoners, in being not an alien only to his country and his family, but in wrestling with famine and continual death and thousands of other things. Who are of note among the apostles, and indeed to be apostles at all is a great thing, but to be even among these of note, just consider what a great encomium that is. But they were of note owing to their works, to their achievements. Oh, how great is the devotion of this woman, that she should even be counted worthy among the appellation of the apostles. And even here he does not stop, but adds other encomium besides, and said, who were also in Christ before me. Well, Junia was a Jewish woman and an early Christian convert. And this mentality about women being on an equal footing, and Junia being an apostle, was pretty much in the texts until Luther and the Reformation. Luther is well known for saying wonderfully misogynist things, such as, a man is born with broad shoulders and narrow hips so that he might lead, and a woman is born with narrow shoulders and broad hips and a broad fundament upon which to sit at home. A woman should be like a nail in the wall, stuck in one place. And now he loved his wife dearly, but he really believed the woman's place was in the home and not preaching and not being out and not working. And very, very German medieval attitude towards women. And so he chose the translation that became common, and that was the translation of Junias, not Junia. And it becomes even more prominent in the 19th century, which is when we start to get funny ideas about gay people, about women's roles, about Africans, about all kinds of things that have nothing whatsoever to do with the teaching of Jesus, but have everything to do with what we would call white male supremacy. And the church was right in there supporting this. So the reason I'm talking about this is really, really quite present, because the Southern Baptist Convention, which many people that I knew when I was young belonged to. If you were Baptist, you were part of the Southern Baptist Convention, not the American Baptist Convention, but the Southern Baptist Convention. Very conservative, very evangelical. This is where all the jokes come from, about you never go fishing with one Baptist because they'll drink all your beer. You have to take two with you so that they watch each other and you can drink your beer yourself. Those kinds of jokes. Anti-liquor, so on. Well, very moralistic. In the Southern Baptist Conference, the convention, they have a terrible scandal of child rape and child molestation that was covered up, that was protected, that was hidden by the church leadership. So youth pastors and these are men, these are not gay men, these are heterosexual pedophiles that were protected by the church. And instead of addressing that, instead of putting women in position, because it's been proven that if you have a woman in a position of leadership, that this kind of behavior tends to not happen as often. Instead of doing that, what did they do this week? They began banning churches that had female pastors. So ignoring the teachings of Christ, the teachings of Paul, the scripture itself, they turn a blind eye to all of that and decide that instead of addressing the issue of corruption and rape of children in their church, they're going to just get rid of all the women pastors. go stay at home. You can't preach. Come to church, pay your money, but don't preach. I gave a sermon last week about at the Methodist Church here. I gave a sermon about live your life so that Jesus would want to have dinner with you. And this was the passage, where Jesus goes to Matthew, the tax collector, says, "Come on, come with me." And he goes and they have dinner, and the Pharisees shake their fingers, say, "Who are look, your teacher is hanging around with bad people," and so on. And then Jesus proceeds to castigate them beautifully, and then does a couple of things that are impure. A woman who has been hemorrhaging for 12 years touches his cloak, and now Jesus is actually impure now because he's been touched by a woman who cannot enter synagogue. And he just tells her, he doesn't upbraid her, he doesn't tell her to cut it out. He just says, take heart. And then he goes to another house and touches the dead body, of a little girl who died, and she comes back to life. But he's not supposed to touch dead bodies. That's another impure act. And my question to the congregation was, who among us in our society are those impure people, those people that we reject, the people who live on the margins, and they are gay and LGBTQ and trans and drag queens. And these are not people who commit crime. These are people who are rejected by their families, who are rejected by their communities, who have high suicide rates because of who they are. And as the church's response to this has been, oh, they're bad people. And then after that sermon, I was having breakfast this week, and a former member of a congregation came up. She came in and sat down with my wife and I. She was waiting for somebody else. And she says, oh, you'll never believe what happened. I went to work. I was going to work as a church secretary, and there was a black man sitting on the steps. And he had cloth grocery sacks with clothes in them, and he had white socks on, and he had taken his shoes off. And I asked him, well, now she has to actually get past this guy to get in, right? Otherwise, I'm sure she would. So she asked him if he needed, what was he doing? He said, I'm just out of prison. She said, I was shocked. I was just shocked. And then I got really nervous because he was just out of prison. And I went to the Lutheran church, and there was nobody there. And I went to the Methodist church. There was nobody there. And then I came to this church, and there's nobody here, but you've shown up. And the woman goes, oh, look, I'll get you some help. And she called the police. And she said to me, while she's telling me this story, my heart's just sinking as she's telling me. She said, well, you should have seen the look on his face when the police showed up. I said, really? Because this man just got out of prison and he called the police on him because he needs a place to stay? I mean, why his shoes are off? Because his shoes pinch his feet. All right. He's been walking. His feet are sore. He's hurting. He's hot. He's tired. He's probably hungry. And he can't find any solace among the good Christians of our community. And the one Christian he meets calls the police on. Well, that's not being a good disciple, and it's certainly not being a good apostle. And as I look around our communities and I look around our Christian community, the disciples are few and the apostles are even fewer. And I'm really more inclined to look to the margins for the apostles. Well, because if you look at the apostles, Jesus said they were all marginal folks. There wasn't a rich, upstanding citizen among them. Okay, they were all marginal. And I think if you want to find Jesus, if you want to follow Jesus, you're going to end up on the edges of society, and that's where God is, and that's where Jesus has his dinner. And that's my message for this week. I was going to play a guitar for you. Not that you're going to miss it or anything, but I broke a string, and maybe that's I don't believe in coincidence. Maybe there's powers at work that said no, please just don't do it this week. So maybe I'll get a new string on there next week and punish you further. From St. Mary's Church. I'm not really in St. Mary's Church, but I was there, and I took this picture. And the reason I went there is because I'm a real fanboy of Desiderius Erasmus. I think he was just a wonderful, wonderful scholar, and I really wish that I could have sat down and listened to him and talked to him. Such a kind, gentle, humanist soul he was. And he preached in his church, and so I was like, oh, I'm so thrilled to be in a place that he was. And so this is from the bell tower. I'm sure he didn't want to go to the bell tower, but man, I trudged up those steps to take this picture of King's College in Cambridge, in Cambridgeshire, England. And I wish you have a good week, and I'll see you in 2 more weeks. Thank you very much. God bless.